The unexpected landing. Captain Zora Vex of the galactic exploration vessel Starweaver gritted her teeth as she wrestled with the ship's controls. The sleek, state-of-the-art craft shuddered and groaned, fighting against her every command as it plummeted through the atmosphere of an uncharted planet. "Status report," she barked, her four eyes narrowing as she scanned the rapidly changing readouts on the holographic displays surrounding her. Her first officer, a lanky Quarian named Nyx, frantically tapped at his console. "Primary and secondary propulsion systems are offline, Captain. Gravity dampeners failing, and hull integrity is down to 62%. Zora cursed under her breath. This was supposed to be a routine mapping mission of a newly discovered solar system in the Outer Rim. How had it gone so catastrophically wrong? As the ship continued its uncontrolled descent, Zora's mind raced through their options. The Starweaver was the pride of the galactic exploration fleet, equipped with the latest in xenotechnology. Its adaptive hull was designed to withstand the pressures of deep space and the heat of atmospheric entry. Its quantum drive could bend space-time itself, allowing for faster-than-light travel across vast distances. And yet, here they were, about to crash on some backwater planet that wasn't even in their star charts. "Nyx, deploy emergency landing struts," Zara ordered, her voice steadied despite the chaos around her. "Redirect all remaining power to the inertial dampeners. We're going to have to make a rough landing." The ship's AI chimed in, its serene voice a stark contrast to the blaring alarms. "Warning. Unidentified energy signature detected on the planet's surface. Composition unknown. Advise extreme caution." Zara's antenna twitched in irritation. "Noted, ARIA. But right now, I'm more concerned with surviving the next 5 minutes." As they broke through the cloud cover, Zara got her first glimpse of the alien world below. Rolling hills covered in lush vegetation stretched as far as the eye could see, broken only by winding rivers and the occasional clearing. In one such clearing, she spotted what looked like a cluster of primitive structures. "There," she exclaimed. "That's our best shot. Nyx, adjust our trajectory. We're aiming for that settlement." The Starweaver screamed through the sky, leaving a trail of smoke and debris in its wake. Zara's hands flew over the controls, coaxing every last bit of responsiveness from the failing systems. With a bone-jarring impact, the ship plowed into the soft earth, carving a deep furrow across the landscape before finally coming to rest at the edge of the settlement. For a long moment, silence reigned in the cockpit, broken only by the hiss of escaping gases and the crackle of shorting electronics. Then, slowly, Zara unclenched her hands from the controls and looked around. "Sound off," she called out. "Everyone all right?" A chorus of groans and affirmatives answered her. Nyx was already running a damage assessment, while their xenobiologist, Dr. Lyra 10, was peering out the viewports with undisguised curiosity. "Captain," Lyra said, her voice tinged with excitement, "you're going to want to see this." Zara unstrapped herself and moved to join Lyra at the viewport. What she saw made her four eyes widen in disbelief. Approaching the ship was a motley assortment of beings, clearly the inhabitants of this world. They walked on 2 legs and had only 2 arms each, their bodies covered in various types of crude coverings. But what caught Zora's attention was the diversity among them. Some were tall and willowy, others short and stout. Their skin tones ranged from pale to dark, with every shade in between. And their faces, each one was unique, with an astounding variety of features. "Incredible," Lyra breathed. "A single species with such genetic diversity. The implications are staggering." Zara was more concerned with immediate matters. "Are they hostile? Can we communicate with them?" As if in answer, one of the beings stepped forward. It was of average height for its kind, with a mop of curly hair atop its head and a face adorned with facial hair. It wore some sort of protective garment covered in stains and wore odd cylindrical coverings on its feet. To Zara's amazement, the being raised a hand in what seemed to be a gesture of greeting. Then it spoke. The universal translator in Zara's neural implant crackled to life, struggling to process the unfamiliar language. After a moment, words began to form. "Well, folks," the being said, its voice carrying a note of amusement, "looks like you've had yourselves quite a landing. Name's Josh McCoy. Welcome to New Appalachia. Now, let's see about getting you folks out of that fancy tin can and figure out what's what, shall we?" Zara exchanged glances with her crew. This was certainly not how she had expected first contact with a new species to go. But as she looked at the smiling face of the being called Josh, she couldn't shake the feeling that their misfortune might have led them to something extraordinary. With a deep breath, she straightened her uniform and prepared to face this new world. "Well, crew," she said, "it seems our mission has taken an unexpected turn. Let's go meet the locals." As they prepared to disembark, Zara couldn't help but wonder what other surprises this planet and its inhabitants had in store for them. Little did she know, their adventure was only just beginning, and the beings known as humans were about to challenge everything she thought she knew about the universe. The eccentric mechanic. As Captain Zara Vex and her crew emerged from the battered Starweaver, they were immediately struck by the planet's atmosphere. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, a mix of organic matter, machinery, and something indefinably alien to their senses. Josh McCoy, the human who had greeted them, stood at the forefront of the gathered crowd. His weathered face broke into a wide grin as he took in the sight of the extraterrestrial visitors. "Well, I'll be damned," he chuckled, scratching his beard. "When they said New Appalachia was the final frontier, I didn't think we'd be getting visitors from beyond the stars. You folks look like you could use a hand, and maybe a stiff drink." Zara stepped forward, her translator working overtime to process the local dialect. "Greetings, Josh McCoy of New Appalachia. I am Captain Zara Vex of the galactic exploration vessel Starweaver. We appear to be in need of assistance." Josh's eyes twinkled with barely contained excitement. "Assistance? Honey, what you need is a miracle worker. And lucky for you, that's exactly what I am. Josh McCoy, owner and operator of McCoy's Miracle Garage, at your service." He gestured expansively towards a large, ramshackle structure nearby. The building was a patchwork of various materials, some Zara recognized, others completely foreign. Surrounding it was a veritable graveyard of machinery in various states of repair or disrepair. Nix, Zora's first officer, leaned in close. "Captain, are you sure about this? These beings seem primitive." Josh's sharp ears caught the comment. "Primitive, eh? Well, Mr. Fancy Pants, why don't you tell me what caused your ship to drop out of the sky like a rock with delusions of flight?" Nix bristled at the human's tone, but found himself at a loss for words. It was Dr. Lyra Ten who spoke up, her scientific curiosity overriding any sense of caution. "Our quantum drive experienced a catastrophic failure," she explained. "The resulting energy cascade disabled our primary and secondary propulsion systems, as well as most of our other critical systems." Josh whistled low. "Quantum drive, you say? Well, ain't that something? Tell you what, why don't we get your ship over to my garage and take a look-see under the hood?" Zara hesitated. The idea of entrusting their advanced starship to this unconventional being seemed risky at best, but a quick glance at the Starweaver's mangled form told her they had little choice. "Very well, Mr. McCoy, but I must warn you, our technology is far beyond anything you've—" Josh cut her off with a hearty laugh. Now, Captain. Rule number 1 of the universe. Never underestimate a determined human with a wrench and a problem to solve. Jeb, bring out old Bessie. We've got ourselves an interstellar tow job." To the crew's amazement, a massive vehicle rumbled into view. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, a hodgepodge of parts that seemed to defy the laws of engineering, yet somehow functioned as a cohesive whole. As old Bessie began the process of towing the Starweaver to McCoy's Miracle Garage, Zara and her crew found themselves swept along in Josh's wake. The human moved with a frenetic energy, firing off questions faster than their translators could process. So, what's the fuel mix on that quantum drive? Antimatter, exotic particles, or something a bit more esoteric? Josh's eyes gleamed with genuine interest. And that hull, adaptive materials, right? Bet it's got some kind of molecular restructuring properties. Am I warm? Dr. Ten, despite her initial reservations, found herself engaged in an animated discussion with Josh. It's remarkable, she murmured to Zara. He's grasping concepts that took our scientists centuries to develop. As they entered the garage, the alien crew was struck by the organized chaos of the space. Tools of all shapes and sizes lined the walls, interspersed with diagrams and blueprints covered in scribbled notes. In one corner, a device that looked suspiciously like a small particle accelerator hummed quietly. Josh clapped his hands together, startling the aliens. Right then, let's get to work. Captain, I'll need you and your crew to give me a full rundown of your systems. Don't leave anything out, no matter how insignificant it might seem. For the next several hours, Josh listened intently as Zara and her team explained the intricacies of the Starweaver's systems. He asked pointed questions, his brow furrowed in concentration as he absorbed information that should have been far beyond his comprehension. As the alien sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cluttered garage, Josh finally stepped back from the ship. He wiped his hands on a rag, leaving smears of grease on his already stained coveralls. Well, folks, he said, his tone a mix of excitement and determination, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is, I think I can fix your ship. Zara's antenna perked up. And the bad news? Josh's grin widened. The bad news is, it's going to involve a bit of creative engineering. Hope you're ready for a crash course in human ingenuity, Captain, because we're about to do the impossible. As Josh turned to rummage through a nearby toolbox, Zara exchanged worried glances with her crew. What had they gotten themselves into? And more importantly, what did this eccentric human have in store for their beloved Starweaver? Little did they know, Josh McCoy was about to introduce them to a fundamental aspect of human engineering, the art of making something work with whatever you have on hand. The next few days would challenge everything they thought they knew about technology, problem solving, and the capabilities of a species they had initially dismissed as primitive. As the first stars began to twinkle in the alien sky, the real adventure was just beginning. In the heart of McCoy's Miracle Garage, a revolution in interstellar engineering was about to unfold, one that would forever change the course of galactic history. A lesson in human engineering. The following days at McCoy's Miracle Garage were a whirlwind of activity, punctuated by moments of sheer bewilderment for Captain Zora Vex and her crew. Josh McCoy, the enigmatic human mechanic, attacked the problem of repairing the Starweaver with a fervor that bordered on manic. All right, folks, Josh announced on the morning of the second day, his hair wild and eyes bright with lack of sleep and excess caffeine. We're going to start with the basics. Your quantum drive. It's toast. Kaput. Deader than disco. Nix, the first officer, bristled. That's impossible. The quantum drive is the most advanced piece of technology in the known galaxy. It can't simply be toast, as you put it. Josh's grin only widened. Oh, but it is, my multi-limbed friend. But don't you worry your pretty little head about it. We're going to replace it with something better. Dr. Lara 10 couldn't contain her curiosity. Better than a quantum drive. What could possibly? A flux capacitor, Josh interrupted, his voice filled with pride. The alien stared at him blankly. A what? Zara finally managed. Flux capacitor, Josh repeated, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. It's the heart of any good time machine, or in this case, space-time manipulation device. Before any of the crew could voice their skepticism, Josh was already elbow-deep in the Starweaver's engine compartment, humming an unfamiliar tune as he worked. Over the next few hours, the alien visitors watched in a mix of horror and fascination as Josh systematically dismantled their sophisticated propulsion system. In its place, he began constructing something that looked like it belonged more in a junkyard than a starship. "Mr. McCoy," Zara ventured cautiously, "I'm not sure I understand your methods. How exactly is this contraption supposed to replace our quantum drive?" Josh emerged from the engine compartment, his face streaked with grease. "It's all about thinking outside the box, Captain. Your quantum drive was trying to bend space-time through brute force. This baby?" He patted the half-assembled device lovingly. "This works with space-time. It's like dancing with the universe instead of trying to wrestle it into submission." Dr. Ten's scientific curiosity got the better of her. "But how does it function? What's the underlying principle?" Josh's eyes twinkled mischievously. "Well, that's the beauty of it. I'm not entirely sure myself, but I know it'll work. Call it human intuition." As the day wore on, Josh's flux capacitor began to take shape. It was an odd assemblage of parts, some salvaged from the Starweaver, others sourced from Josh's eclectic collection of machinery. At its heart was a pulsing crystal that Josh claimed he'd won in a poker game with a guy who swore it fell from the sky. By nightfall, the device was complete. It hummed with an energy that set the aliens' teeth on edge and made their fur stand on end. "There she is," Josh said proudly, stepping back to admire his handiwork. "Now let's see about getting the rest of your systems back online." The next few days followed a similar pattern. Josh would identify a problem, propose a solution that seemed utterly absurd to the alien crew, and then proceed to implement it with a combination of scavenged parts, improvised tools, and what he called good old-fashioned elbow grease. The Starweaver's adaptive hull. Josh patched it with a mixture he claimed was inspired by my grandma's secret recipe for fixing leaky roofs. The result was a substance that seemed to bond at a molecular level, integrating seamlessly with the ship's advanced materials. The failed gravity dampeners. Josh rigged up a system using principles he claimed were derived from watching too many sci-fi shows as a kid. To the crew's amazement, it not only worked but seemed to function more efficiently than their original system. As the repairs progressed, Zara and her team found themselves reluctantly impressed by Josh's unorthodox methods. What he lacked in formal education, he more than made up for with creativity, intuition, and an uncanny ability to make disparate parts work together in harmony. On the fourth day, as Josh was elbow-deep in rewiring the ship's neural interface, Dr. Ten couldn't contain her curiosity any longer. "Mr. McCoy," she began, her tentacles twitching with excitement, "I must admit, your methods are unlike anything I've ever encountered. How did you learn to do all this?" Josh chuckled, not looking up from his work. "Well, Doc, it's a funny story. See, I grew up on a farm in old Appalachia back on Earth. We didn't have much, but we had to keep everything running. Tractors, combines, the ancient pickup truck my granddad swore was part of the family." He paused to wipe sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of grease. "When something broke, we couldn't just run out and buy a new one. We had to fix it, usually with whatever we had lying around. You'd be surprised what you can do with baling wire, duct tape, and a little imagination." Nix, who had been watching the proceedings with a mixture of horror and fascination, couldn't help but interject. "But this is advanced technology. Surely your farm equipment can't compare to a starship." Josh's grin widened. "You'd think so, wouldn't you? But here's the thing. At its core, all machinery follows the same basic principles. It's just a matter of scale and complexity. Once you understand how things work at a fundamental level, you can apply that knowledge to just about anything." He gestured to the ship around them. "Take your Starweaver here. Sure, it's got all sorts of fancy gadgets and gizmos, but strip it all away, and what do you have? An engine to make it go, a hull to keep the bad stuff out and the good stuff in, and controls to tell it where to go. Not so different from my granddad's old Ford when you think about it." As Josh turned back to his work, Zura found herself mulling over his words. There was a simplicity to his approach that was both refreshing and slightly terrifying. It challenged everything she had been taught about the rigid structures of galactic engineering and the supposedly insurmountable gap between advanced civilizations and emerging ones. As the day wore on, Josh's repairs continued to defy expectations. He replaced delicate sensor arrays with what he called a good old-fashioned weather vane, souped up with some quantum entanglement. The result was a system that seemed to predict spatial disturbances with uncanny accuracy. The ship's eye, which had been offline since the crash, posed a particular challenge. Josh spent hours poring over its neural pathways, muttering to himself and occasionally breaking into fits of laughter. "You know," he said to no one in particular, "this reminds me of the time I had to reprogram my cousin's robotic milking machine. Ornery thing kept trying to milk the chickens." Before anyone could question the relevance of this anecdote, Josh made a final adjustment. The AI sputtered to life, its holographic interface flickering into existence. "Systems online," it announced, its voice carrying a hint of surprise. "All functions operational. I appear to have developed a sense of humor." "How peculiar." Josh patted the console affectionately. "There you go, darling. A little personality never hurt anyone. Now let's see about getting you airborne again." As the sun began to set on the fourth day of repairs, the Starweaver hummed with new life. Systems that had been critically damaged now functioned at peak efficiency. The ship's sleek lines were marred by patches of mismatched materials and odd protrusions, but there was no denying the raw power that thrummed through its frame. Josh stepped back, wiping his hands on a rag as he admired his handiwork. "Well, folks, I reckon she's just about ready for a test flight. What do you say we take her up and see what she can do?" Zara exchanged glances with her crew. They had come to trust Josh's abilities, unconventional as they were, but the thought of entrusting their lives to a ship that had been so radically altered was daunting. Sensing their hesitation, Josh's expression softened. "Look, I know this isn't what you're used to. But sometimes you've got to have a little faith. Human history is full of stories about people achieving the impossible simply because they didn't know it couldn't be done." He placed a hand on the ship's hull, his voice taking on a note of reverence. "This old girl, she's not just a collection of parts anymore. We've given her a soul, breathed new life into her. And I promise you, she'll fly true." As the alien sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Zura made her decision. With a deep breath, she nodded to Josh. "Very well, Mr. McCoy. Tomorrow we fly." As the crew retired for the night, each lost in their own thoughts about the coming day, none of them could have predicted the adventures that awaited them. The Starweaver, reborn through human ingenuity and a healthy dose of what Josh called redneck engineering, was about to take them on a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the universe and about the remarkable species known as humans. The test flight. The dawn of the fifth day broke over New Appalachia, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. The air thrummed with anticipation as Captain Zora Vex and her crew gathered around the newly repaired Starweaver. The ship, once a sleek testament to advanced alien engineering, now bore the unmistakable marks of Josh McCoy's unorthodox repairs. Josh himself stood before the assembled group, his coveralls stained with grease and his eyes bright with excitement. "All right, folks," he announced, clapping his hands together. "Today's the big day. We're gonna see if all our hard work pays off." Zara stepped forward, her antennae twitching nervously. "Mr. McCoy, are you certain the ship is ready for this? Perhaps we should run more diagnostics, or—" Josh cut her off with a good-natured chuckle. "Captain, if we wait for everything to be perfect, we'll never leave the ground. Sometimes, you've just got to trust your gut and take the leap." With that, he strode towards the ship's entrance ramp, gesturing for the others to follow. "Come on, then. Adventure awaits." As they boarded the Starweaver, the alien crew couldn't help but notice the changes to their once familiar vessel. The sleek control panels had been replaced with a hodgepodge of buttons, switches, and what appeared to be an old-fashioned steering wheel. In the center of the main console sat Josh's pride and joy, the flux capacitor, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. "Right," Josh said, settling into the pilot's seat. "Let's fire her up and see what she can do." With a series of flips and switches that seemed more ritual than procedure, Josh brought the Starweaver to life. The ship hummed with power, the deck vibrating beneath their feet in a way that was both familiar and utterly foreign. Mr. McCoy," Nick ventured, his multiple eyes darting nervously around the cockpit, "shouldn't we perhaps start with some simple maneuvers? A low-altitude flight to test." His words were cut short as Josh threw a final switch. The Starweaver lurched upward with a force that pinned them all to their seats. Through the view screen, they watched as the ground fell away at an alarming rate. "Yeehaw!" Josh whooped, his hands dancing over the controls. "Now that's what I call a takeoff." As they broke through the cloud layer, the ship's new systems sprang to life. Holographic displays flickered into existence, showing readouts that mixed standard galactic measurements with what appeared to be hand-drawn gauges. "All right, let's see what this baby can really do," Josh said, his voice filled with barely contained glee. "Hang on to your tentacles, folks. We're going to light speed." Before anyone could protest, Josh pushed forward on the throttle. The stars outside the view screen began to stretch into lines of light. The ship shuddered, the hull creaking ominously as it approached speeds it was never designed to achieve. Just as Zara was certain they were about to shake apart, everything suddenly went quiet. The vibrations ceased, and the view outside stabilized into a kaleidoscope of swirling colors. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted extraterrestrials," Josh announced proudly, "welcome to what I like to call the groove. We're surfing the waves of space-time itself." Dr. Ten, who had been clutching her seat with all four of her arms, slowly relaxed her grip. Her scientific curiosity overcame her fear as she leaned forward to examine the readings on the nearest display. This is impossible," she breathed. "We're traveling faster than light, but there's no relativistic stress on the hull. It's as if we're outside of normal space-time." Josh nodded, his grin widening. "Exactly. Remember what I said about dancing with the universe instead of wrestling it? That's what we're doing right now. We're not so much moving through space as we are grooving with it." As the initial shock wore off, the alien crew began to appreciate the smooth, almost peaceful nature of their flight. The Starweaver, for all its cobbled-together appearance, was performing beyond their wildest expectations. Zara found herself drawn to a particular readout, one that showed their position relative to known galactic landmarks. Her eyes widened as she realized the implications. "Mr. McCoy," she said, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "According to this, we've traveled over 10,000 light-years in less than an hour." Josh nodded, his expression one of pride tinged with a hint of surprise. "Well, would you look at that? Seems like old Bessie here has some get-up-and-go in her after all." As they continued their incredible journey, Josh began to explain some of the principles behind his modifications. He spoke of concepts that seemed to blend advanced physics with what he called good old country logic. The alien crew found themselves captivated, their preconceptions about human technological capabilities crumbling with each passing moment. "You see," Josh said, gesturing to the pulsing flux capacitor, "the key was realizing that space-time isn't some rigid thing. It's more like a river. And just like a river, it's got currents and eddies. Once you learn to read those currents, you can use them to your advantage." He patted the console affectionately. "That's what this beauty does. She doesn't just punch through space-time like your old quantum drive. She feels out the currents and rides them, like a surfer catching the perfect wave." As Josh continued his impromptu lecture, mixing complex theoretical concepts with colorful analogies about fishing and whitewater rafting, the alien crew found themselves seeing the universe in a whole new light. The rigid, mathematically precise model they had been taught was being replaced by something more organic. more alive. Hours passed like minutes as they soared through the cosmos, visiting distant star systems and witnessing celestial phenomena that had only been theoretical to them before. With each new discovery, the sense of wonder and excitement grew. Finally, as they approached the edge of the known galaxy, Josh eased back on the controls. The swirling colors outside the view screen faded, replaced by a breathtaking vista of stars and nebulae. "Well, folks," he said, leaning back in his seat with a satisfied sigh, "I'd say that was a successful test flight. What do you think? Ready to head back home?" The alien crew exchanged glances, a mixture of emotions playing across their faces. They had just experienced something beyond their wildest dreams, something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the universe and their place in it. Zara stepped forward, her voice filled with a new respect as she addressed the human mechanic. "Mr. McCoy, Josh, I believe I speak for all of us when I say that we owe you a debt of gratitude. You've not only repaired our ship but opened our eyes to possibilities we never imagined." Josh waved off her thanks with a bashful grin. "Aw, shucks, Captain. I just did what any good mechanic would do. Saw a problem and fixed it the best way I knew how." As they began their journey back to New Appalachia, the mood in the cockpit was one of camaraderie and shared wonder. The barriers between human and alien seemed to have melted away, replaced by a mutual appreciation for the mysteries of the universe and the joys of discovery. Little did they know, their adventure was far from over. As they re-entered the atmosphere of Josh's home planet, a new challenge awaited them, one that would put their newfound friendship and Josh's remarkable skills to the ultimate test. A new perspective on humanity. As the Starweaver descended through the atmosphere of New Appalachia, the alien crew's excitement was palpable. Their successful test flight had not only proven the effectiveness of Josh's unorthodox repairs, but had also opened their eyes to a new way of thinking about the universe and their place in it. Captain Zara Vex stood behind Josh, watching as he expertly guided the ship through the cloud cover. "I must admit, Mr. McCoy," she said, her antennae twitching with barely contained enthusiasm, "I had my doubts about your methods. But you've shown us something truly remarkable today." Josh grinned, his eyes never leaving the controls. "Well, Captain, sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to stop thinking about it as a problem. You've got to see it as an opportunity." As they broke through the last layer of clouds, however, Josh's expression suddenly changed. His brow furrowed as he leaned forward, squinting at the landscape below. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "Looks like we got ourselves a situation down there." The alien crew crowded around the view screen, trying to see what had caught Josh's attention. At first, everything looked normal. The rolling hills, the patchwork of fields, the cluster of buildings that made up the settlement. But then they saw it. A massive storm system was approaching from the west, its dark clouds roiling with barely contained fury. Lightning arced between the clouds, and even from their altitude, they could see the wind whipping across the landscape. "That there's a supercell," Josh explained, his voice grim. "Nasty piece of work. Tornadoes, hail, the works, and it's heading straight for the settlement." Zara's hearts sank. After all they had been through, after all Josh had done for them, the thought of his home being destroyed was unbearable. "Isn't there something we can do?" she asked, her voice filled with determination. "Surely with all this advanced technology, we can help somehow." Josh was quiet for a moment, his hands moving over the controls as he brought the Starweaver in for a landing. As the ship touched down on the outskirts of the settlement, he turned to face the alien crew, a familiar glint in his eye. "You know what?" he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I reckon there might be something we can do. But it's gonna take some of that out-of-the-box thinking we've been practicing." Over the next hour, as the storm drew ever closer, Josh outlined his plan. It was audacious, borderline insane, and relied heavily on technology that by all rights shouldn't work together. In other words, It was perfectly in line with everything they had come to expect from the eccentric human mechanic. The plan involved using the Starweaver's newly modified systems to create a localized distortion in the atmosphere, essentially a shield that would deflect the worst of the storm around the settlement. To do this, they would need to jury-rig a series of weather control devices using parts from the ship, Josh's extensive collection of spare parts, and a few items borrowed from the townsfolk. As they worked, the aliens found themselves marveling once again at Josh's ability to see connections where none seemed to exist. He combined advanced alien technology with simple Earth machines in ways that defied conventional logic, yet somehow worked. "See, the trick is to work with nature, not against it," Josh explained as he connected what looked like an old satellite. "See, the trick is to work with nature, not against it," Josh explained as he connected what looked like an old satellite dish to the Starweaver's power core. "We're not trying to stop the storm. We're just gonna nudge it a little." As the wind picked up and the sky darkened ominously, the motley crew of humans and aliens raced against time. Josh's neighbors, initially skeptical of the strange visitors, quickly pitched in when they realized what was at stake. They brought out old equipment, spare parts, and even kitchen appliances that Josh somehow incorporated into his weather-altering device. Dr. Ten worked alongside Josh, her scientific curiosity overcoming her initial doubts. "This defies everything I know about meteorology and physics," she marveled as they calibrated a makeshift array of sensors. Josh just winked at her. "Sometimes, Doc, you've got to forget what you know and focus on what you need to do." As the first massive drops of rain began to fall, Josh announced that the system was ready. The device they had created was a bizarre amalgamation of alien technology and Earth ingenuity. At its heart was the Starweaver's flux capacitor, pulsing with otherworldly energy. "All right, folks," Josh said, his hand hovering over the activation switch. "Hold onto your hats. This might get a little weird." With a decisive movement, he flipped the switch. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing at the seams, a shimmering dome of energy sprang into existence over the settlement. The effect was immediate and awe-inspiring. As the supercell slammed into the energy field, it began to split and flow around the protected area. Lightning crackled and thunder boomed, but within the dome, there was an eerie calm. "It's working," Mix exclaimed, his multiple eyes wide with disbelief. "I can't believe it, but it's actually working." Josh grinned, though his focus never wavered from the control panel in front of him. "Don't celebrate just yet. We've still got to hold this thing together until the storm passes." For the next few hours, the unlikely team worked in perfect harmony. As the storm raged around them, they made constant adjustments to the field, compensating for fluctuations and reinforcing weak points. Josh directed their efforts like a conductor leading an orchestra, his intuitive understanding of the cobbled-together system proving invaluable. Finally, as dawn broke, the storm began to dissipate. The energy dome flickered and faded, leaving behind a landscape that was wet but largely undamaged. A cheer went up from the gathered townspeople as they realized they had weathered the worst storm in living memory without a single loss. As the aliens emerged from the Starweaver, they were met with a sight that took their breath away. The humans of New Appalachia, far from being afraid or suspicious of their otherworldly visitors, were approaching with open arms and beaming smiles. "I don't understand," Zara said, overwhelmed by the outpouring of gratitude. "We're strangers to your world. Why would you trust us so readily?" An older woman, her gray hair wild from the wind, stepped forward. "Honey," she said with a warm smile, "any friend of Josh's is a friend of ours. And after what you did for us today, you're not strangers. You're family." As the impromptu celebration continued, with humans and aliens mingling freely, Josh pulled Zara aside. "You know what," he said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "I reckon you folks came here thinking you were going to teach us something. Show us the wonders of the galaxy and all that. Zara nodded, a bit sheepishly. I suppose we did. We thought. Well, we assumed your civilization was primitive compared to ours. Josh chuckled, shaking his head. And instead, you learned something about us, didn't you? We did, Zara agreed. Your people have an incredible capacity for adaptation, for seeing solutions where we see only problems. You take disparate elements and combine them in ways we never imagined possible. It's more than that, Josh said, gesturing to the bustling crowd around them. Look at them. A few days ago, the idea of alien life was just a fantasy. Now, they're trading recipes and swapping stories like old friends. Zara watched as Dr. Ten animatedly explained some scientific principle to a group of fascinated children, while Nix was being taught how to do what appeared to be a traditional Earth dance. I think I understand, she said slowly. It's not just about technology or knowledge. It's about connecting, adapting, seeing the universe not as a set of immutable laws, but as a realm of endless possibilities. Josh nodded, a proud smile on his face. Now you're getting it, Captain. That's the real secret of humanity. We're not the strongest or the fastest or even the smartest beings out there. But we've got one thing going for us that's served us pretty well so far. And what's that? Zara asked. Josh's eyes twinkled with mischief and pride. We're too darn stubborn to know when something's impossible. So we just go ahead and do it anyway. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting a golden light over the rain-soaked landscape of New Appalachia, Zara found herself reevaluating everything she thought she knew about the universe and humanity's place in it. The Starweaver, with its improbable modifications and jury-rigged systems, stood as a testament to human ingenuity. But it was more than that. It was a bridge between two civilizations, a symbol of what could be achieved when different perspectives came together in harmony. As Zara watched Josh head off to help with the post-storm cleanup, chatting and joking with aliens and humans alike, she realized that their unplanned detour to this backwater planet had given them something far more valuable than any star chart or scientific discovery. It had given them a new perspective on the universe and their place in it. And perhaps, just perhaps, it had given the galaxy a glimpse of the incredible potential that lay within the species known as humans. As she joined her crew in the celebration, Zara couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of a much greater adventure. With humans like Josh McCoy out there, pushing the boundaries of what was possible, the future of the galaxy looked brighter than ever before.